All right, I'm sorry about that. Good evening, everyone. I was trying to read a chat message there before I started the lesson tonight. Good evening, everyone. Hope everybody's doing well. We will be in Revelation chapter 21 tonight. Thank you for being here. We will only get through 8 verses tonight as we start to draw our study of Revelation to a conclusion. But we will take probably 2 or 3 more weeks after tonight because there's so many good things to deal with in these last 2 chapters that we don't want to just rush through some of that. So beginning, the first thing then I would like to do is just read the first 8 verses of chapter 21. If you have your Bibles open, just follow along if you'd like. I'll read the 8 verses and then we'll work our way through them. I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth passed away, and there is no longer any sea. Let me stop for just a moment as we go back to chapter 20, and those who were with us last week or have reviewed the recording from last week, we tried to emphasize that chapter 20 is the crescendo of the entire book. Or it draws to a conclusion all of the things that it had been building toward from chapter 4. That's at least my way to organize the book of Revelation. Chapter 4 through 20 is a section of itself and a series of visions. And in those visions, it reveals sources of evil: the dragon, the beast, the false prophet, the city of Babylon the Great, which was referred to in the text as the great prostitute or the great harlot. And all of these, every single one of them, by the end of chapter 20, have been defeated and cast into the lake of fire. And so that's where we left off last week in chapter 20. The lake of fire has now consumed the dragon, the beast, the false prophet, and the great prostitute. So chapter 21 and 22 then are, in my opinion, the epilogue of the story of the series of visions. It is the war is over, the battles are done. Evil has been harnessed and silenced and done away with. So now what's left? So what is left is what's going to go on, what's going on with the saints, the believers. And so as we begin chapter 21, the writer now sees a vision of a new heaven and a new earth. The first heaven and the first earth have passed away. Verse 2, I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, made ready as a bride, adorned for her husband. I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, behold, the tabernacle of God is among men, and he will dwell among them. They shall be his people, and God himself will be among them. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will no longer be any death. There will no longer be any mourning or crying or pain. The first things have passed away. He who sits on the throne said, behold, I am making all things new. And he said, write, for these words are faithful and true. He said to me, they are done. It is finished. I am the Alpha, the Omega. I am the beginning and the end. I will give to the one who thirsts from the springs of the water of life without cost. He who overcomes will inherit these things, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. But for the cowardly and unbelieving and abominable and murderers and sexually immoral persons and sorcerers and idolaters and all liars, their part will be in the lake that burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. So we'll stop there. And although the last verse has its negativity to it, prior to that, the first 7 verses are very positive. And again, coming off of the conclusion of chapter 20, the concluding comments and thoughts, that evil is dealt with. By the end of chapter 20, all evil and corruption and sin has been dealt with, has been cast away. Now, what is going to happen? And so the writer, John, says everything's going to become new. What was will be no more. At least it will be no more in the sense that it did exist, has existed from the very beginning. So first thing I'd like to do is kind of tie in as many of these verses to Old Testament scriptures as I can, and there are several of them. So if you want to have your pencil ready to write some of these down, we'll turn to them as well. Some of them we know good enough that we can just quote it. So the very first thing in verse 1 of chapter 21 says there's a new heaven and a new earth. The first heaven and the first earth passed away, and there is no longer any sea. This obviously is a reference to at least Genesis 1. So I'll put this on the screen. Revelation 21, verse 1, goes all the way back to the very first verse of Scripture, which says, as you recall, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. That is the first heaven and the first earth, as referred to in Revelation. In Genesis 1, God created the heavens and the earth. As we continue to look at Genesis 1, it has more to say there. So let's be sure that we cover it all. It's I'm turning to it myself so I don't misquote it or say it incorrectly. Verse 2, the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. So there's a tie-in or a connection, I think, in Revelation 21:1 to Genesis 1 and verse 2, 1 and 2. God created the heavens and the earth. It was in the beginning, there was a mass of some type of formless void and darkness. It talks about the surface of the deep. When it talks about the deep in Scripture, generally, it's talking about waters, like a chaotic ocean of some kind. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. Notice how in Revelation 21, we're told there that this original heaven and earth is to be replaced by a new heaven and a new earth. In other words, a new creation. God is continuing to create. And the new heaven and the new earth, which we will look at in detail, is going to be totally different from the existing heaven and earth. And the strange statement there that says, and there was no longer any sea. If you just trying to change that around, there was no longer any waters. And then you reflect back on the first 2 verses of Genesis. There was chaotic waters before the actual creation took place. The Spirit was hovering over. It doesn't use the word sea, S-E-A, but there's a reference to chaotic waters, and the sea, I think, in Revelation and the chaotic waters of Genesis chapter 1 are the same thing. So there's, at the beginning, there's darkness, and there is uncontrolled or chaotic waters that are present, the Spirit's hovering over that, and God, from that point, begins to create the first heavens and the first earth. John, obviously, to me, is referring to that when he begins chapter 21, verse 1. So if you wonder, oh, there's no longer any sea, what does that mean? And I'm just speculating to a certain extent. I don't know that I can prove this, but most of the time, waters, especially deep waters, is a reference to chaos, to things out of control, to things that are not under the control of God himself, but God brings them into his control. And so that's what creation was at the beginning, taking something that was dark and chaotic and creating it into something that was good. And in fact, he even says in Genesis 1, after each day of creation, God saw that it was good. So something good, God turned something good from something that was chaotic and eerie and whatever other words you might want to use. But at the end, when the new heaven and the new earth are created, the chaos goes away. I think that's the reference here. I think that's what he's trying to say. Also, well, let's see, where did I go? I need to go backwards. Excuse me a moment. It's here somewhere. I'll go back to it. I did have it. Where did it go? It went in screen sharing. That's where it went. Pardon me for this. Everything looks like now it's upside down. There we go. Let's try it again. A second passage that I would like for you to look at, and with regard to the first verse, is over in Isaiah 65. So if you'd like to turn there, the book of Isaiah and chapter 65. Verse 17. We're going to be in Isaiah for a few minutes, 65. So just don't close it up here. We'll just keep looking at it. Chapter 65, verse 17. Behold, I am creating a new heavens and a new earth. The former things will not be remembered or come upon the heart. Be joyful and rejoice forever in what I create. For behold, I create Jerusalem for rejoicing. We'll stop there because we're going to come to that in just a moment in Revelation. So the prophecy of Isaiah also refers to a time yet in the future. So John's inclusion of this concept in Revelation is not something that's new. It was something the prophets spoke about hundreds of years before. And specifically here, we see where Isaiah prophesied about the coming of new heavens and a new earth. Why do we need new heavens and a new earth? And basically the answer is because the current heavens and the current earth are corrupt. They are a place of chaos, even though Genesis 1 says that God spoke into existence light, although there had been nothing but darkness, and that God also spoke into existence order where there had been nothing but chaos. As we continue to read through the book of Genesis, we read there, especially at the fall in the Garden of Eden, that there was a curse placed upon this earth. And the curse created, actually sin entered into the world through the sinfulness of the first man and the first woman. And as a result of that sin, chaos returned. Chaos and corruption returned. And so what is the reason for a new heaven and a new earth? Well, we just studied that last week. All of the evil has now been dealt with. And so now it's time to start over. There's going to be a new heaven and a new earth. And in this heaven and earth, there will no longer be any seed. That is, there will no longer be any corruption. There will no longer be any chaos. All right, verse 2 talks about a holy city, New Jerusalem. And so I just read that back in Isaiah 65, verse 19, actually verse 18. Be joyful, rejoice forever in what I create. For behold, I create Jerusalem for rejoicing, and her people for joy. I will also rejoice in Jerusalem and be joyful in my people. And there no longer be heard in her the voice of weeping and the voice of crying. There will no longer be an infant who only lives a few days, or an old man who does not fulfill his days. For the youth will die at the age of 100, and the one who does not reach the age of 100 will be thought accursed. They will build houses and inhabit them. They will also plant vineyards and eat their fruit. They will not build and another inhabit. They will not plant and another eat. For as the lifetime of a tree, so will be the days of my people, and my chosen ones will wear out the work of their hands. They will not labor in vain or bear children for terror, for they are the seed of those blessed by Yahweh, and their offspring with them. And it continues on. What is it basically saying there in Isaiah is basically the same words that it is saying in Revelation 21. We'll see how that plays out. But the point initially here is Jerusalem is being used, the city of Jerusalem is being used as the habitat of God's people, God's blessed people. And so the new heaven and the new earth will involve a new Jerusalem. Notice also that this new Jerusalem is coming down out of the heavens. And the way it's pictured here, the new Jerusalem's already been created in the heavens, and now it comes from above and comes down to the earth. We have a image in our mind that when we die, we're all going up to heaven. But this particular picture is that heaven is actually coming down to us. We're not going up to heaven. It is coming down to us. So some of our thinking about what the future looks like or what the end times might look like, sometimes they have to be tweaked a little bit. We have to be corrected a little bit. So it's not where we go. In fact, what's actually happening here is that heaven and earth, whereas heaven was above and earth was below, we're going to see in these last two chapters that heaven and earth actually join together to become one place, not up there or down here, but here. They're both together. So that is the picture being portrayed and presented here. It is a picture that was prophesied in Isaiah 65. So again, this is not a new concept to the people reading this. This is John saying this is the fulfillment of the prophecies that you are already familiar with. Okay, continuing on. So verse 3. Well, before we leave verse 2, let's just make the reference there that the city of Jerusalem is being prepared for the people of God. This is an intentional preparation. God is intentionally making a place of blessing available, and it is being prepared as a bride would prepare herself to be married to her husband. So we think in terms of weddings today, according to our culture, Of course, in that day, it was a little bit different, but still, a bride prepares herself for her husband is used as a metaphor for what God is doing for his bride. His bride is the church, or the people that have surrendered themselves. The saints of God surrendered themselves to him through his son, the Lord Jesus, and he's preparing a place. So it's intentional. We should be blessed and understand that the hope of the future is an intentional preparation by God for his people after evil has been totally destroyed. There is no longer any evil. It was exterminated at the end of chapter 20. Now what's left? New heaven, new earth, new Jerusalem that has been prepared by God himself for his people for this very reason, for this very time. And now he is bringing it down to the earth. He's coming down, bringing it to his people. Verse 3. I heard a loud voice from the throne. So now we're still there with this up there, down here idea, because that's where the throne was. But the throne is, as you will see, the throne is also coming down. By implication, that's what's being taught. So I heard a voice from the throne saying, behold, the tabernacle of God is with men. The tabernacle was the tent of the holy place in the wilderness that became the permanent building structure known as the temple when it was built by Solomon, where? In Jerusalem. So you see the tie together. Jerusalem was the place where the temple was built. Jerusalem was the place where God came and lived in the Holy of Holies, dwelt in that building structure. Now, in the new city, the dwelling place of God has come back. When Revelation was written, most likely the temple has already been destroyed. The actual physical temple in Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 AD. Most scholars, or at least many scholars, believe that the book of Revelation was written 20 some odd years after the destruction of the temple. So there is no temple, most likely, at the time that Revelation is written. And yet, John is saying God is coming to dwell with his people. Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men. He will dwell among them. They shall be his people, and God himself will be among them. So I've referenced this to Exodus chapter 6. If you'd like to now turn over there, Exodus chapter 6, verse 7. And those of you who've been with us for most of this year, earlier this year, I did a extended study of what I'm about to read you right now. So in Exodus 6, verse 7, let me go to verse 6 first. Exodus 6:6. Say to the sons of Israel, I am Yahweh. I will bring you out from under the hard labors of the Egyptians. I will deliver you from their slavery. I will also redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgments. Then I will take you for my people, and I will be your God. And you shall know that I am Yahweh your God, who brought you out from under the hand, out from the hand of laborers of the Egyptians. I will bring you to the land which I swore to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. I will give it to you for a possession. I am Yahweh. So this statement in verse 7 that says, I will be your God, you will be my people, is repeated dozens of times throughout Old Testament scripture. And that's the part we studied. We looked at many places throughout the Old Testament that basically says this in so many words: I will be your God and you will be my people. John picks that phrase up in chapter 21 in verse 3. It's also repeated again down there in verse 7. I will be your God and you will be my son. This is ultimately the entire purpose of God. The entire purpose of God is for God to dwell among his people, for God to live and to tabernacle. The concept of the tabernacle is a concept of where God lives. Of course, we know the heavens and the earth, neither the heavens or the earth could contain the full presence of God. It is metaphorical, it is symbolic. Where the tabernacle is where God is. This particular text indicates that the tabernacle is in the new city, the holy city, the new Jerusalem that has come down from God, and God has come down with it. It's not just a city that comes down, but God has come down with it. This is how I arrive at the conclusion that the heavens and the earth now join together as one place, not two, not God up there and us down here, but God down here and us down here with him, we dwell together. He will be our God and we will be his people. Verse 4, where he says he will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no longer any death. There'll no longer be any mourning or crying or pain. The first things have all been passed away. So I kind of read that also from Isaiah 65. I read some of that. But let's also go to Isaiah 25 and verse 8. Isaiah 25 and verse 8. If I can get there. He will swallow up death for all time, and Yahweh will wipe tears away from all faces, and he will remove the reproach of his people from all the earth, for Yahweh has spoken. And it will be said in that day, behold, this is our God in whom we have hoped, that he would save us. This is Yahweh in whom we have hoped. Let us rejoice and be glad in his salvation. So by reference to the tears being wiped away and the other items that are mentioned here in Revelation 21, again, it is a reference to a prophecy that's several hundred years old from Isaiah, that this is going to happen. And John is saying, as he writes this book, this now, when these things happen, this will be the fulfillment of these prophecies of Isaiah. There will be no longer any tears, no longer any death. Well, where did death come from? Death came from the fall in Genesis. So now we can go all the way back to the book of Genesis, where Adam and Eve committed their sin and the curse was placed upon the earth, but the curse was also placed upon all mankind, and they no longer were to live in that setting forever, but death would be the result. Death is the result of sin. Death is the result of the curse. Revelation 21 is the reverse of Genesis. It's the reverse. And as we continue to just walk down verse by verse, we can refer it back to the consequences of sin in Genesis are now dealt with in the book of Revelation, the last two chapters. So there won't be any more tears. Why are there tears? Well, there's tears because there's pain and suffering. Well, that's going to be reversed. The reason there won't be any tears is because there won't be any more pain or suffering. There won't be any more death. There won't be anything to mourn over. All of these things, verse 4, pass away. They're all gone. Why? Well, because of chapter 20, because all of the enemies of God have been dealt with, because all of the things that create chaos and corruption and pain and hurt in the world have all been thrown into this lake of fire. They don't exist anymore. They're not available to create pain and hurt any longer. Therefore, what's left is that God has come personally. This is the picture. God has come personally down to his people to wipe away every tear from their eye. It says he will do that. It does say there won't be any more tears, but what it says is the tears that you've already cried, he wipes away. He will personally wipe those tears away from every eye, every tear from every eye. What a powerful lesson is being taught here. It's just why I couldn't go over this quickly. I just didn't want to rush through. This is so important. So still moving on, we have verse 6. Where he says, he said to me, some translations translate this, it is finished. But the translation that I'm reading from says they are done, or it is finished. Well, where did you hear that before? It is finished. Those were the words of Jesus on the cross. It is finished. Though not the same words in Greek, the concept, however, is still the same. Jesus made all of this possible at the cross. It is now because of what Jesus did, the lamb that was slain, that is described throughout the book of Revelation, is responsible for the situation in chapter 21, where all tears will be wiped away. It is finished. It is done. Verse 6 of 21, it is finished, simply refers to the fact that all of the enemies of God have been dealt with. So this is prophetic. This is something that will yet happen in our life, but this is what's going to happen. This is the ultimate destiny of all things. They will all become new, and the tabernacle of God is going to dwell among men, just like it dwelt among men in the wilderness in Exodus, or in the temple in the days of Solomon when he built it. This is the destiny of the world that's being portrayed here. Continuing, verse 6, I am the Alpha and the Omega. Well, that's again reference to chapter 1. He started out with that statement, and now he is closing out this book with the same statement to say to those who read, God is saying, I am the beginning and I am the end. There will be a lot of chaos, and there may be a lot of toil and struggle and pain and tears and death in between. But I am the beginning, and I will be the one who finishes. I have control. God is saying to us as we read this, I have control of the destiny of the world. Evil will not win. Evil does not have the upper hand. Evil is not going to ultimately be successful. God says, I am the end. I am the Omega. I then will give to everyone who is thirsty water from the springs of life, from the wells of the water of life, and that will be without cost. So go with me to Isaiah 55. Isaiah 55, verse 1. The prophet says, Ho, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters, and you who have no money, come, buy and eat. Come, buy wine and milk without money and without cost. Why do you spend money for what is not bread, and your wages for what does not satisfy. Listen carefully to me and eat what is good, and delight your soul in richness. So the prophet is prophesying. Again, the same prophet continues to prophesy, and John is leaning heavily on the words of the prophet Isaiah as he writes these concluding words in Revelation 21. Are you thirsty? Well, come and drink. I will provide with the Jesus even said himself, if you come to me, I will give you living water. If you drink of me, you'll never thirst again. If you eat of me, you will never hunger again. John is writing the conclusion of that story, where it's all free. It's freely given because of the mercy, the grace of a loving God who is blessing his people for their faithfulness, who is blessing their people because in the midst of all the persecutions that they had to endure, they did endure. Their faith was not removed from them. And now God is returning the blessings to them for their faithfulness. And it's without cost. And I'll let you drink of this water freely, and you don't owe me anything. He who overcomes will inherit these things, and I will be his God, and he will be my son or my child. They will be my children. Again, that is a reference to dozens of verses just like that throughout the Old Testament that we studied in previous lessons. So there we are with the blessing. And verse 8, of course, is the pronouncement of judgment upon those who have chosen to deny faith in Jesus, deny faith in God. The cowardly, the unbelieving, the abominable, the murderers, sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, liars will all be a part of the same lake of fire in which the dragon and the beast and the false prophet have already been thrown into. And so all others who persist in a way of life that is anti-Christ, against the Lord Jesus, who persist in following the ways of the dragon, the beast. If you persist in that, then you will be thrown into, that person will be thrown into the same lake of fire that they have been thrown into. But what is really trying to be emphasized here is not so much that negative as it is the positive. What God is going to do for the people who are faithful, who have hung on to their faith throughout the crises of their life, the persecutions and toils and labors of their life, they will be rewarded. And this is the beginning of how that is described. So that's kind of working through those first 8 verses. And so let's see what I've got here. Is that right? It looks to me like somehow my slides got out of order some way. Let's see what happened here. I do not know what happened. Let me do it this way. Let me stop sharing, and then I'll come back and start sharing again and see if I can get that corrected. Maybe. It's funny how things get, everything works great until you start to present it in the lesson and you have the recording going, and then all of a sudden it looks like everything kind of gets messed up. So here's that, and there's that. Let's see if I can get it working again. All right. So what does the new heaven and the new earth look like? Well, we've already been through it. We just walked through it, but let's kind of enumerate a little bit just to summarize or to kind of bring it together. What is this new heaven and new earth going to look like? It's not working. What happened? Let's see. Okay, hold on a second. Um, Sorry about this. Well, now it's acting up again. All right. Maybe you just have to do it this way. I apologize. Starting all over. That's not right. I don't know where those nines came from. Um, well, first of all, maybe the slide is not going to work right now. So let's stop and just recount. I'll just try to do it from memory. Oh, maybe it will. Let's see. Oh, okay. Good. First of all, there'll be no more sea, as we've already emphasized. That means there'll be no longer any chaos. There'll be no longer darkness. There'll no longer be something to fear, to be afraid of. There's no longer something that creates a situation that is out of control, that brings upon a person dread or drudgery. There's no longer any sea in the new heaven or the new earth. Secondly, it's going to look like a wedding. It's going to look like a loving bride and a loving husband who have come together, united to be as one. They are in love with one another. They are bringing themselves together in unity. And so I would perceive this to be God himself taking his bride, which would be his loyal servants, his saints, the people who have chosen to follow him, the people who have chosen to love him and to commit themselves to him. So the new heaven and the new earth is going to look like a marriage. It's going to look like a celebration, a wedding feast. That's where I kind of messed up there. So let's see what else. It's going to look like a city, a heavenly city. It's going to look like a place where God lives. It's going to look like a temple, pretty much. Also, it's going to be a place where there will be no tears, no death. You know, death is probably, I don't know how you think about death, just death in general. But death is what makes this world a downer. We love our life. We love the people that we know and we affiliate with and associate with, but we just get older and things happen. And sometimes young people pass away, people who die before their time. But even if it's someone older who has lived out their days in its fullness, there is still a loss at death. Death is just an evil. It's an evil that you and I cannot control. However, in the new heavens and the new earth and the new Jerusalem, there will be no death. Once we rise to the new life in resurrection by Jesus Christ, we will rise to life, never, ever to die again, never to lose those people that we love ever again. It's not going to be there. There's an eternal presence of God and an eternal life that never ends. That's what's going to be in the new heaven and the new earth. Also, as a result of that, then there will be no need for any mourning or crying, and there will certainly be no pain. We prayed for some folks tonight, some of your loved ones that we prayed for, having to endure sickness and pain and approaching their own mortality, the end of their lifetime, and the loss that will be encountered in that. But in the new heaven and the new earth, these things do not exist. They no longer will be there. And we will enjoy the blessing of eternity without death and without pain and without disappointment and without loneliness. I mean, we can just continue to name all of the things that make this life painful. None of those will be in the new heaven and the new earth. So he says, the new heaven and the new earth will be all brand new. Everything new. All things are new in Jesus Christ, new creation. And there'll no longer be any evil or corruption. And so that's the last verse there, verse 8. All of those types of people, they won't be there. They won't be there. Troublemakers, dictators, evil rulers, evil people, they won't be there. They're gone because all things are new. Well, one more thing I'd like to cover before we kind of look at this from a summary perspective is that I would like to show you a chiasm that's in the first 5 verses, somewhat of a chiasm. And it more or less, it's going to repeat what I've already just taught, but it puts it in a chiastic format. So here we go. First thing is, and it's not going to show it to me because why? Let's see. There it is right there. Let's see if I can make it work. Hopefully. There we go. Okay. So in verse 1, it talks about a new heaven and a new earth. In verse 5, we're told that God is making all things new. So there's an emphasis in these first 5 verses of the newness of the destiny of God's people. There are good things about this world. There are good things about the first heaven and the first earth. There are good things. There's beauty here. There is love here. There's pleasure. There's joy. There are many things that are good, but there are also so many things that are evil. And so John wants everyone to know, and so he begins this chiasm and ends the chiasm saying it's all going to be made new. Rejoice. Rejoice in the newness that is yet to come. Secondly, well, it went a little bit faster than I meant for it to. Let's see. There we go. Secondly, it says the first heaven in verse 1, the first heavens and the first earth have passed away. In verse 4, it says the first things have passed away. So that's the opposite of the first point that I just made here. Everything's going to be new. The original is going to pass away. The good part is that the good things that are a part of the first heaven and earth will continue in the second one and even be better. But the bad things and the evil things of the first heaven and the first earth, they will pass away. They will go away. They will no longer exist. There will no longer be any sea in verse 1. There will no longer be any death in verse 4. So death is part of the chaotic sea of life. Why are we afraid of the dark oceans? Why are we afraid of the seas? Why were they afraid of them? Well, we're dark and it was dangerous and people died. And we can kind of see this throughout the Bible. What was the sea of the flood? What did the flood do? Well, the flood cleansed the earth of all people except those upon the ark. What happened in the days of Jonah when he was in this boat and all of a sudden this storm comes along and the waters are chaotic and the only way they can calm the waters down is to throw Jonah the prophet overboard where he is consumed by a big fish. Well, all of that is a picture of chaos and you can trace this picture of chaos with water all the way through the Bible, huge, large bodies of water. And ultimately, it is the death, the concept of death and dying, that creates most of the chaos in people's lives, even today, the chaos that is created as a result of that. But the new heaven and the new earth, they don't exist. Those things will not be there. But why? Because they have passed away. Why? Because God is created and making all things new. It's all going to be something different and something better. So what's the middle of the chiasm? It's kind of a twofold statement. The middle of the chiasm is when the holy city comes down and the tabernacle of God is with men. All the way through the book of Revelation, God was on the throne in heaven, and all this chaos was going on down on the earth. And there was a distinction between heaven and earth, what was going on above and what is going on below. But that no longer exists. That dichotomy between heaven and earth no longer exists in the new heaven and earth, because the holy city comes down out of heaven. The throne of God comes down to the earth. The tabernacle of God is not up there, it is down here with us. That is a huge thing to understand in these verses. We no longer talk to a God up there. We enjoy the presence of God right here with us. He has come down, and he has brought his holy city, his holy tabernacle. He's brought that down with him when he comes. So there's your chiasm, and hopefully that is meaningful to you. And we will then look at our final summaries and concepts as we conclude tonight in these 8 verses. First thing I would say then is, when you get to chapter 21, the war is over. The war ended at the end of chapter 20. The war is over. There's no more battle. There's no more fighting. There's no more corruption. And so as you enter into chapter 21, it's like take a deep breath and refresh yourself. The fighting's over. It's like lay down your weapons, lay down your implements of war. There is no longer anyone to fight. God has destroyed all of his enemies, and the people of God now can rejoice. The war is over. Secondly, when you reach the end, you're going to find that it's only a new beginning. Think that through for a moment. We think, well, what's it going to be in the last days? What is the end of the world going to look like? It's going to look like something new. It's going to start all over again. So what we sometimes refer to as the end is nothing more than a restart, a new creation, a new beginning. I am the Alpha, I am the Omega, the beginning and the end. But when you get to the end, you find out he's the Alpha all over again, and he's the beginning. And so we now have new worlds, new creations, new heavens and new earth. And it's about God coming to us, not us going to God. The initiative has all along been God's initiative, not mine. Sometimes I can recall in sermons that I've heard throughout my life, if you'll do this, if you'll do that, then God will forgive you. But it's the initiative is not me. I don't make the first step. God comes to me. That's the initiative. It's always God's purpose and goal and plan from Genesis all the way to the end has been he takes the initiative to correct the problems of the world. We think that it's our job to correct the problems of the world. I have to correct everything. So I have to vote for the right president, and I have to be a part of the right political party, or I have to hold the right political views, because humanity is the answer to itself. And the Bible teaches that is no way that is the truth. It is God who is the answer. And from the very beginning of time, God has taken the initiative to come to us. And one of my favorite scriptures, I preached on it today in Kentucky. And I preached on it last week in a little different way, but one of my favorite scriptures. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. But that sounds like I have to take the initiative. I have to draw first, and then he'll respond, which is, of course, not true. Because Jesus says himself in John 6:44, no man can come to me, Jesus says, unless the Father draws him. And so the initiative has always been on God's part. God comes to us first, and then we respond to him. And as we respond to him, then he further responds to us. God comes down to us because he loves us. And even in the midst of our own sinful ways, God has promised he will come. He comes to us. The next summary item here is that heaven and earth become one. I've stated that a couple of times tonight. It's no longer heaven up there and earth down here. When God comes down, he brings heaven with him. We used to sing a song, I think, and see if I can remember the words. Heaven came down and glory filled my soul. Heaven comes down and earth becomes one with God. In the new heavens and the new earth, all things are new. And in that new heaven and new earth, there is no longer any death or mourning or crying or pain. It is all new. Then next, the ultimate blessings of God are an inheritance that God blesses us with. He doesn't charge us anything. It is like a father giving his children his inheritance. They didn't earn it. They probably don't deserve it. We don't deserve it. It would be even something that would be valuable enough that if we could afford it, we would pay for it. Of course, we can't afford it. And so it's an inheritance. It's a gift that God provides without cost. Come if you're thirsty and drink from the wells of the springs of life without cost. Drink freely. I've just gotten through reading, or I'm presently reading, actually a couple of books related to an incident in World War II in the Philippines. And one of the things, as I was reading one of the books, it was talking about how they were prisoners of war, and Americans were prisoners of war, and how poorly the Japanese soldiers treated them. And one of the things was that they denied them food and water, and they would just barely give them enough to just barely survive. And the book was written in such a way that I became thirsty. I wanted to go get some water because my throat was drying up. It was just reading it and whatever. And we'll never thirst again in the new heaven and the new earth. We'll never thirst again. That means to say you'll never be unsatisfied. You'll never be in a place where you lack something and you crave something, but it's not there. That will never happen in the new heavens and the new earth, because this is a gift of an inheritance to God's people for their faithfulness. Do we deserve it? No, we don't deserve it, but we did respond to it. We put our faith and trust in it. And that's really all it took for God to say to us, you are my children, and now you are my heirs. Notice how much of this conversation is in the Old Testament about the land. What was the thing that God was going to do for the Israel? He's going to give them the land as an inheritance. It's all about inheritance. It's been that way. from earlier passages of the Old Testament, now all the way through, even to the book of Revelation. We are heirs of God and joint heirs with Christ because of his love for us, and it is without cost. He charges us nothing. And as we wrap it up, ungodliness will be totally purged from the new world to come. All evil and suffering and pain and ugliness and corruption and sin will not exist in the world to come. Why? They've all been thrown into the lake of fire. And we won't be there. That is the hope of the children of God. That is the hope of believers in Jesus Christ. You and I will not be thrown into the lake of fire, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. We won't be there. All ungodliness has been thrown there. And the picture is to the extent that it will be destroyed there, it will never rise again. It will never again arise out of the lake of fire. It will be burned up. It will be destroyed. So all ungodliness will be gone, and only grace and mercy and love and joy and peace and goodness and celebration and kindness and compassion and you name it, that's what will be there. And we will rejoice in the presence of a holy God forever and ever. That's the message of Revelation 21, 1 through 8. We've got more to go as we continue in chapter 21 next week, and then the following week we'll probably deal in chapter 22. Hope this has been a blessing to you tonight, and we'll end our lesson with that tonight, and then see if we have any questions afterwards.